We're coming to you live from the IEC National Results Center in Johannesburg, Midrand, South Africa. Welcome to the show, Elections 2024 on SowetanLIVE. My name is Nwabisa Makunga, editor of Sowetan, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to bring you this brand new show where we look at the coming week, really delving into the elections that we're busy with at the moment and helping you make sense of what it all actually means for you. It's a big day for South Africa. 30 years ago, many South Africans, 19 million of them, went out to vote for the first time in a democratic election. 12 million of those South Africans voted for Nelson Mandela to become our first black president. And today we're sitting here celebrating those 30 years and really looking back into what it is that we were able to do over those many, many years. Today we're asking the question whether or not people came out to vote again today to express themselves. And I'm sitting here with my colleagues Noxolo, Sibiya and Koena, Mashale, who really went out for most of the day from about 6 a.m. in the morning. Ladies, how are you feeling, first of all?
I'm hungry.
You're making it sound like we actually don't feed the people who work with. But I can absolutely understand. It was really, really a big day. It was a long day. Started from about 6 a.m. In the morning. So Noxolo, I want to start with you. Your experience just of today from the morning.
Look, I've visited Thokoza today and Katlehong. Really a lot of middle-aged and elderly people coming out to vote. Not as much young people as we saw between the early hours. Numbers of young people started picking up just after lunchtime, just not as much as we would imagine. But really quite a moment of confusion for a lot of people who are queuing, particularly because they still weren't certain which political parties to vote for as they were standing in those queues.
So perhaps for those who don't know, perhaps paint a picture for us what Thokoza is like, what it's known for, and really what the mood was in some of the queues that you went to.
So Thokoza is in the East Rand, Eguruleni, and Thokoza and Katlehong are just divided by a street. And in these two areas that I went to, the one area is Ward 52 that is quite populated by a hostel and really low to medium income households, yes. And in that particular area, quite packed. The queues were extremely long. People stood for hours. I met one gentleman who queued for about 4 hours and quite adamant that he was going to make his mark, but really not excited to really be voting. Just what they call a dull moment, just to see if anything will come out of it, because a lot of them were quite disappointed with the past couple of years and what the administration has offered or the lack thereof.
So perhaps before we come to some of those experiences, I just want to find out from you, the IEC released a statement earlier on today, and they were basically saying, well, bar a few, incidents here and there, the voting essentially went smooth. What was your experience of that?
Sure, very different at this voting station in Thokoza. It's called the Thokoza Service Point, Municipal Service Point offices. And they actually had a problem with their scanning machine. So it lost signal, which resulted in one person being scanned, or them trying to process one person for about 15 to 30 minutes. And you can imagine a number of people standing outside waiting to be processed. So that caused a lot of delays. In about 30 minutes, there were over hundreds of people queuing at just that station trying to get processed. Just after lunchtime, as I said, young people were coming out. It became worse. And when we left that area, a lot of people were also walking away saying, we'll come back a little bit later, we'll come and see how it looks like. Sure. And there was a bit of a glitch at that station, not as smooth as they say.
So I'll come back to that. Koena, it's the first time that you are you're covering an election, as a journalist. Welcome to the grind.
Thank you so much.
But you really went, you were quite adamant this morning. You went looking for young people, and that's really because, the story we've heard is about how young people will define this election. What did you find? Where did you go and what did you find?
So firstly, I went to the John Orr Technical High School in Parktown. So when I got there was actually already, 20 people already lined up to get inside, and there were actually a lot of young people amongst those 20. And when I got there, they were just conversating amongst themselves. It was a calm setup, and everything was already running smoothly. From there, I went to Wits Old Mutual Hall inside the campus itself, and by that time I was already like I think 9 in the morning, and the line was long. And when I started speaking to them, all of them were literally talking about the same thing. I am hungry. I just want to go home. And it was very fun because not only were they playing music, but at the same time chatting and making sure they were interacting with each other, not to get bored, I think, in the line. And then from there, I went to the Metro Center in Johannesburg, and the line there was actually quite shorter than I expected, but it did get a little bit longer as the time spanned out.
And from an IEC point of view, were things kind of going smooth?
From the IEC point of view, everything was really running smoothly. There was just a delay at the Wits hall. They did start a little bit, I think 2 hours later, because they didn't quite set up at the right time. So that was the only delay, but everything seemed to run smoothly. The lines were quite productive.
So I think in Sowetan from about a couple of months ago, and particularly this week, one of the things that we were wanting to really concentrate on, Noxolo, is why people are voting, right? And I know I want us to take a look at a video, where you spoke to a gentleman in Thokoza where you were, and let's just perhaps hear what he had to say today about why he is that he's voting.
We are here outside the Thokoza Service Point municipal offices, where some of the voters have been queuing for quite some time, waiting in queue to make their mark. With me is Nwabisa, who's going to share a little bit with us of what he remembers from the 1994 elections and how he felt then compared to what he is feeling now. Nwabisa, ngiyabonga kakhulu ngokukhuluma nathi. Awusitshele kancane ngokuthi i-experience yakho ngo-1994 beyinjani maniyekhethweni?
Yona kuyayijabulisa ngoba sasingazi ukuthi vele silindele ukuthi sobona okuhle ngoba ke manje kodwa ukuhamba kwesikhathi kuyabonakala ukuthi hayi izinto ngathi azishintshi.
Iziphi lezo zinto Nwabisa ofuna wena ukuzibona ngathi ziyashintsha?
Isimo esiphathelene nempilo zabantu, isimo sokuhlala, isimo semisebenzi, ugesi nawo uyabambezela emabhizinisini ngendlela osebenza khona, uyakhanya uyacisha, amanzi vele njengoba ey'mpilo vele abanye abantu banawo ukuthutha.
And ngiyakutshela phambilini ukuthi kwakumnandi ngimile emakhiweni bona 23 nihleka nixoxa kumnandi, kodwa namhlanje isimo ngathi sishintshile kancane. Ingani?
Awukubona izinto aziqhubekeli phambili, zilozimile nje ndawonye ethembeni kulo uthembileyo kodwa ukuthi izinto zizoshintsha ukuthi isikhathi siyahamba izinto ezenza.
Ngiyathemba ukuthi ukhetho lwakho namhlanje lizosiza ukushintsha ezinye zalezi usozishintsha.
Hayi, kuyathembisa khona ngoba nabantu abaningi sebebonile ukuthi hayi le nto ababecabanga ukuthi akusiyo. Futhi-ke manje sebebonile ukuhamba kwesikhathi nokushintsha kwabantu, mhlawumbe uma bekushintsha kuzoba ngcono.
Iy'ngane zakho ngicela ungitshele kancane ngazo, utshela ukuthi nazo iy'ngane eziwu-4 eziwu-2 azisebenzi. Ingaba yini isizathu esenza ukuthi ubone ngathi uhulumeni akasebenzeli isimo sokuthuthukisa iy'ngane ey'ngasebenzi mhlawumbe?
Indlela nje usho ukuthi nemfundo yakhona ayihambisani noma nje abantwana bafundela ukuthi bayoqashwa, abafundeli ukuthi bazenze lokwabo. Lokho nje kwenza ukuthi bangaphili phambili.
Ngiyabonga Nwabisa, ngiyabonga kakhulu.
Noxolo, what is interesting for me, listening to Nwabisa, he's basically saying, in 1994, we came out, we were very excited when we came out and we voted when we were voting for change. And there's something he says in that clip where he says, impilo ayiqhubekekanga. We haven't seen the change that we were wanting to see. Was he the only one in that community expressing those sentiments?
Yeah. Absolutely not. Every other person that I spoke to in that community, especially amongst the elderly people who voted in 1994, couldn't help but feel that things, the lenkululeko that they were hoping for, the freedom, the opportunities that they were hoping for black people, was actually only just a dream. And in that community, or those two communities, crime was, the center stage as a result of unemployment of young people, and they felt that we thought our kids would be employed, and they are not, and that's why they are resorting to crime and drugs. And essentially a lot of people saying absolutely not, it's not what we hoped for.
Yet they actually come out to vote. What do we read from that?
That's actually very interesting. A lot of them are queuing, and when you ask them what was the importance of waking up and standing in this queue today, they actually take a moment to think, and they ultimately, the sense that I get is that we don't know. We just vote ngoba sekuthiwa it's our right to do so, or we were taught that's the right thing to do as a South African citizen. And I end up having to ask, but are you not hopeful that political parties are actually going to bring about change? And all they say is we can only hope and see. We've been disappointed.
You said something off air about a woman that you met, and for us this question is so simple and so basic, right. But yet for her it was so profound. So we asked the question, what do you want? What do you want to see happen? Do you get a sense that people feel they're not listened to?
People do not feel heard, Nwabisa. This lady held my hand and she said, thank you. Thank you for asking me what I want, because no one asks what we want. And no one cares to listen to our answers. She actually cried, just thanking me for listening to her. I gave her a good 10 minutes, just 10 minutes. And sometimes that's really, what people want. They want to be heard. And in this community, I feel that's exactly why they also weren't sure if their vote was going to make a difference, is because they feel unheard.
Koena, as I said earlier, you went hunting for young people, right? And I actually was enjoying a lot of your journalism coming through. And perhaps let's just take a look at some of the interviews that you've had with some students from Verse University this morning.
How are you? I'm good. How long have you been standing in line?
How long have I?
Been standing in line.
It's been over close to an hour now. Yes.
And how are you feeling today?
I'm excited because it's my first time actually voting. And then there's a lot of, excitement around this stage of voting, especially around this time. There's a lot of energies that are going, there are a lot of changes people want, and it was quite difficult actually choosing a party which one needed to vote for. So yeah, quite anxious.
Do you know who you're going to choose inside? You don't
I
have
think
to tell
I've
me.
chosen. I think I've chosen. I've made my choice.
Hi guys, how are you?
Thanks.
Oh, fantastic.
You're fantastic. That's great stuff, man. Did you guys just finish voting?
Yes, we did.
And how was it?
Awesome.
It was nerve-wracking at first, but now awesome.
It was awesome.
Stuff. The future is in these hands.
That's definitely true. So what do you guys hope to get out of your vote? What change?
Yeah. And some actually change. Just change.
Free higher education. Self-funded students are dying. Thanks. The missing middle.
The missing middle. No, that's fantastic. One more question. Where are you guys going after?
Are we going to celebrate our vote? Yeah.
I love the exam.
Oh,
That's such a personal question. Exams can wait. Democracy first.
That's great. No,
Exams can wait, democracy first. I absolutely love that. So, there's something that these students are saying, and I know you've done a lot of work, Koena, on reporting on student life, reporting on issues of funding, for Sowetan. Brilliant work, by the way. Just tell us more about what it is that they're telling you about their hopes as far as this vote is concerned, in particular with regards to those things.
So obviously we all know the biggest problems is basically always funding. They're always constantly crying about funding. So the most thing that we're voting for and hoping to come out of these elections is that it actually does get solved. Because this one guy who I was speaking to said every year it's the same problem, it's the same issue. We always have to either get delayed in terms of registration, or it's either we don't get funding and then we're left behind. So they're always complaining about the same thing, and they do hope that the party that they're voting for, who are constantly listening to them, will come out and actually change that problem for them.
Let me perhaps pick up on that. So Noxolo was saying that, you know, in the community that she went to, or some of the communities that she went to, people felt they were not heard. You are saying that, you know, as far as these students, you know, they're choosing parties that they feel can actually hear them. So how much interaction, you know, just, you know, would they have had with the political parties that they're voting for, which, you know, makes them feel, you know what, we're actually centered in the conversations of these parties?
So most of the parties, and I understand that the dynamic that it works is that half of the time when students always have a complaint or they always have troubles, they go to your youth leagues or your SRCs, they call them, on campuses. So now these SRCs obviously are from smaller political parties in terms of sections, but the one that they always constantly go for, if I do not mind saying it out loud, but is particularly the EFF for them. So they are always constantly hearing them, and we can always see the strikes and the multiple times of outbursts that EFF is always there with them. So they carry that shoulder burden with them, and they feel like they actually do listen because they're there on campus. They literally see the shirt every day. So it's a much more in terms of inclusivity for them. Yeah.
You know, there's something that annoys me, guys, right? So I get annoyed by people who say young people don't care. Young people are disengaged, you know, they don't care, and I don't necessarily believe that. You know, they may be disengaged, perhaps some of them, from the voting process in itself. But I think from, you know, listening to you today, you know, what you found was young people were actually quite engaged. Do you believe that they are, from a campus point of view, do you believe, Koena, that they are insulated from the problems of South Africa, or essentially that their politics are very much centered, yes, on campus, but also as far as what's happening in their communities?
Honestly, when it comes to isolation in their own bubble, they do live in their own bubble. I'm not gonna like I'm a 2000, so
only
yes, very much. So they do live in their own bubble, but they do understand the problems and the politics outside. But when you do actually listen to them and actually sometimes ask them, do you understand what's going on? They would ask you to tell you, honestly, I'm not really good at politics, but I do know that there are a few problems that are not being looked at. So they do understand the outside politics, but they also mostly care about their bubble on campus and what they're going through constantly. So, yeah.
Noxolo, where you went, you know, young people in particular, were there conversations? Did you see them in queues? Did you not?
Very few young people showed up. Quite disappointingly, very few young people stood in those queues. Some kokos even there was a special queue that had to be created for the elderly. But the few young people I spoke to, I think what stood out was the fact that they had made a decision to vote without quite informing themselves on why they were voting. I asked the question, what is the importance for you as a young person to come here today and cast your vote? And a lot of them would be like, I never thought about it. So it actually got me thinking, could it be that they did not read the manifestos? Are they, some of them perhaps going for family familiarity, family loyalty, my family votes for this political party and therefore I will do the same, and therefore not looking outside of what they are caged to do? Or are they simply just, Zobona Pambila, I look at a face, if I like it, you know, I take or I cross. So it was quite interesting, which was very different from an experience Koena and I had yesterday when we went out speaking to different people, where we found young people in Johannesburg were slightly more informed about the different political parties, about the different ballots and what those ballots meant and how they were going to choose even different political parties based on what they understood to be the functions of government in those different spheres. And that was very interesting, juxtaposed to what I experienced at Thokoza today.
You know, you talk about, you know, reading manifestos, and of course there was this joke in the office about who actually read the manifestos, and I think we've had to read them, obviously, because this is the work that we do. But do South Africans really make an electoral choice on the basis of what political parties write on those pieces, you know, on those documents?
I think predominantly no. I think South Africans make decisions based on what they hear from politicians and what they see from politicians' behavior, rhetoric, you know, and that's essentially just it, which is why a lot of political parties choose to appear on TV or come to your home to talk to you and convince you to vote for them, as opposed to give you a piece of paper or papers to read, because really that's what a manifesto is, papers to read. And we do struggle with reading culture, and so it's a bit difficult in that area.
It's a similar situation with what my colleague is saying in terms of, because when I was speaking to them on the ground, most of them were actually saying that honestly I didn't really quite understand the manifestos, but it was discussed. We discussed it in the group, and we discussed what we wanted, what we liked about that one party, what we didn't like about that one person. So it was more of they did not make time, or they did not do research, but it was more of what we see and who we see and who we do not like. So yeah.
So when we come back from this break, I want us colleagues to talk about, some of the experiences that we've seen that even our other colleagues, in different parts of the country have actually seen. You're watching Elections 2024 on Sowetan Live. We'll be back right after this break.
We are Arena. We are home to some of the most trusted and loved brands spanning news, business and finance, lifestyle and entertainment. We believe in connecting people of all cultures. We pride ourselves on creating and curating quality content accessed by consumers when and how they want. We are a multi-platform media network that delivers unrivaled possibilities to advertisers. We reach millions of people each month across our print, digital, TV, radio, events and entertainment divisions. Our mass reach and premium content make us the perfect partner for your business. We are news. At the heart of Arena is a world-class newsroom that is committed to providing the country with breaking news from around the globe. With some of South Africa's favorite and oldest publications forming part of our portfolio, we deliver to readers a continuous feed of news and information ranging from business news, sports coverage to political analysis. We are home to Times Live, one of South Africa's largest websites, and the Sunday Times, South Africa's biggest weekend newspaper. We are entertainment. We bring local and international entertainment to audiences, while at the same time sharing authentic African entertainment with the world. You can leverage the emotional connection we forge through music and movies with strategic brand integration solutions. We are magazines. We are dedicated to bringing magazines to life through a unique blend of newsworthy information and entertainment-focused reading. From travel to decor, lifestyle to the most wanted items around, we bring it all to you. We are television. Through our channels, we take viewers from the latest trends in home decor to cutting-edge business and investment information to entertaining motoring programs. We are radio. Our 2 local radio stations are listened to by a progressive black audience who enjoy a diverse blend of music, news, entertainment and current affairs. We are events. We host and manage some of the most memorable and notable business and corporate events in Africa. We are ready to help you meet your strategic marketing objectives by creating solutions that entertain, innovate, and perform. We use imagination to develop impactful ad formats, creative and branded content, and data and insights to deliver intelligent solutions. No matter who you want to reach, we've got you covered. Because we are media. We are Arena.
Live from the IEC National Results Center in Galaga Estate in Midrand. This is Election 2024 on Sowetan Live. My name is Nwabisa Makunga, and today I'm with my colleagues who don't look as tired as they probably should be because they have been crisscrossing, different parts of the province, just really speaking to, to people. As I said, Noxolo, we obviously not just covering Gauteng, right? A colleague of ours who's based in Limpopo, Peter, he went out to, to find people who were voting today. And he found this woman, and quite an interesting story. So this woman, was saying, she needs to go and fetch water. So he found her on the road, to fetch water. And so he asks her a question to say, are you going to vote? What's happening? And she says, I will vote, but I actually need to go and fetch water first, and then I'll come back, later on. And the reason for that is because if I don't, by the time I come back from a voting station, I will not have water. You've covered, quite a bit of the water issues, for example, in Limpopo. Perhaps draw a picture for us, about how people live there and, some of the turnout that we've seen today.
Some parts of Limpopo are quite rural, and sometimes people underestimate the small things like having roads, having tap water. I visited a village in Woodspruit where they've not seen a drop of water come out of their taps since the dawn of democracy, but they have a reservoir. We know the Giyani water project that was never completed. They had a water project that was never completed. Issues around the project were still being debated, who was at fault, and of course, always investigations looking into some of those issues. And as a result, the grass suffers when the elephants are fighting. And so the people are without water. Like this area that Peter visited, they too felt that they are unheard, but these are the same communities that still understand the value of their vote. Despite having to go and get water, this woman said, I still have to go and vote, because she understood that she will continue to be unheard if she does not cast her vote today. And I think that was quite significant, reflective of the democracy that was created for us to have a voice and be heard. And I suppose she might have chosen a political party that she thought would bring her water.
The interesting thing is, as I say, people will continue to come out, to vote. And especially people who we cover their stories every day. These are people who are really disappointed and people who are angry. But I think they also experience perhaps a different kind of South Africa. So these are people who will be talking about social grants and social security, for example. They get this kind of, and for them, not necessarily that it's enough, but for them it is something, worth actually, placing your eggs next to. And I just wonder perhaps, elsewhere, so back again in Gauteng, some of the issues that people were raising, and as reasons for wanting to vote, are these issues that kind of sway them to move from perhaps what their traditional, party would have been to another party?
Interestingly, I spoke to people who chose those very reasons to stay voting for the political party, and they were quite outright to say, there's a lady, she said, I used to be a street vendor. I used to sell vegetables. I had a table where I sold vegetables. 1994 elections, I voted at this very voting station. And after that, my kids were able to get NSS, my kids were able to graduate, and they were able to, sort of benefit from all these social benefits that were created by government. And that's why I chose to vote what I vote. I don't have a chair anymore. I don't have a table estrateni anymore. I don't sell vegetables. My kids built me a house. They are very well educated. And as a result, I'm quite happy with my decision.
There is a colleague of ours, a columnist of ours, Malaika, who's recently published a book. And the book is about, why we vote ANC. And she went out and really spoke to young people, who vote for ANC. And I think what she was trying to do there is really, kind of debunk this myth that people who vote for the ANC, for example, vote so on basis of historical reasons, right? When I want to come to you again, the question of, of young people. So we know, for example, that young people are saying NSFAS, high access to higher education, etc. But from a value system, if you can think back, is there, do they talk about, this party has, for example, if you talk about corruption, right? If you're talking about, people will talk about state capture. Do those things actually matter to them in any way?
What I've noticed when I was speaking to them, it was a matter of, and also previous conversations, that corruption and those type of problems, it does really matter to them, because in a way it does actually also impact them. As much as maybe it's not a big impact, but it impacts their families and impacts themselves in the long run. So they do pay attention to stories like corruption, and they do understand what those type of things mean, and it's a big thing for them, because at the end of the day, this one boy was like, the reason why I'm voting for this party is that I am tired of my mom complaining about corruption. So I think it's two conflicting things. There's always two opinions, but the essential thing is they do understand what goes on in terms of corruption and all the bad things.
When you mention ESCOM, Koena, I must tell you this morning, you know that app, that load shedding app, and this morning it basically, you know, a notification, it popped, and my heart almost stopped because I was like, no, you can't tell me this is, you know, this is what's going to happen. And of course, I mean, these things actually matter, and they really change people's lives. The one big thing, and I want to come to you, Koena, in South Africa about this election, but also, you know, some previous elections, but it kind of almost feels palpable this time. The issue of immigration, right? You cover immigration, you know, extensively for Sowetan. Just perhaps talk about how it's been a conversation, you know, in the past couple of months, and whether it is something that people you feel may make a decision or have made a decision on the basis of.
I mean, there have been a lot of growing conversations around the topic of xenophobia, immigration, and all that. And the thing is, what people, I feel like, don't really understand is you yourself have your own opinion, and you have the right to have that opinion, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it can really change and be impactful. But the problem comes when now we have conversations about, no, they're taking our jobs, or no, they're doing this and they're doing that. But is it really that is it really that problem? Is it really that stem point? And I think a lot of people now that they do vote on that decision, that no, I'm voting because no, immigrants are coming in and they're taking my job. But is it really your job? Is it, you know, those type of conversations, and they do vote on those type of decisions, and I think it's really misleading. It's disinformation, it's misinformation, really manipulated to create votes.
On the queues today, I mean, I don't know if it's a conversation that actually came out, you know, from both of you or any of our colleagues. Perhaps do you know if it's a conversation that, you know, somebody actually said this is partly why I'm voting?
I did speak to one old gentleman. He actually, first of all, he actually wasn't even supposed to be voting at that station. I had to genuinely help him. And then to the second point is that he actually did say, no, in my area where we live in, there's a lot of immigrants, but he didn't want to say illegal because he saw the badge and was like, I don't want to, you know, say that. But he was mostly concerned about the fact that they're coming in and they're really like taking and changing everything. So to a point where now when we go looking for jobs, they take them because they can accept such little things compared to me. Yes. Yeah. So he was actually saying, I'm voting for this party because they've said that they can deal with this, and I've seen them deal with this. So yeah.
I actually found that a lot of people who were prone to vote for the EFF changed their minds solely on that decision.
Do you think so?
Yes. Yes.
Anecdotally, I actually think so too.
We spoke to a lady yesterday when we went to the Maponya Mall to speak to a couple of people, find out, and she said to us, I'd actually love to vote for the EFF, but I don't agree with their immigration policy, and that's why I'm actually swayed to go towards Mashaba's direction. He was slowly cleaning the city of Johannesburg, and he was slowly trying to get rid of undocumented immigrants. And for her, that was her switching point to turn her back against the EFF and go towards Action SA. So I do agree, people do actually look at some of those, particularly immigration in South Africa is quite a big talking point, especially in Gauteng, looking at, you know, conversations around overcrowding of school. Half the time it's blamed on immigration, overcrowding of healthcare facilities, half the time it's blamed on, you know, immigration. So
lack of jobs,
so it's quite a huge, I think, decision-making point.
So, I mean, you guys have read manifestos, and you don't necessarily have to point to one party or another, but I'm just wondering, you know, if you get a sense that there is a political party that, two things, one, understands the complexity of the immigration matter, but also that can put something forward, a proposal forward, that takes into consideration the complexity of that. So I'm not talking kind of like a populist, you know, I don't want to say the phrase, there's a popular phrase going around, but, you know, it's quite a complex matter. Do you believe perhaps there is a party that speaks to that in its manifesto?
I think political parties struggle a lot with being outright with immigration, and that is probably the biggest reason why the ANC still it's the biggest battlefield for the ANC, where they cannot outright turn their backs on, and also constitutionally there are limitations. There are things you cannot do because our constitution, it's enshrined in our constitution that every single person in South Africa has the right. And so I think it's been a very difficult one for political parties to outright say, when it comes to immigration, of course, except Herman Mashaba, EFF, and a few other political parties who said, well, this is the direction we're taking, and that's the direction we're sticking to outrightly. But political parties have struggled to give an outright take on this.
I would also agree, because these days the immigration laws are really getting much more stricter and really tight, and it's making it a very much battlefield for not only the political parties, but their understanding of not only the laws, but what actually can be done and what can be settled on the ground. So what I found in most of the political parties' manifestos is that they do point out the problems, but they don't really have proper solutions for the problems. They say, yes, we're going to do this, yes, we're going to do this, but how are you going to do that? Yeah. The implementation of how you're going to do that, because they are, like Noxolo said, there are constitutional laws and there are restrictions on certain things that you can do, but I think they are really struggling to understand what actually can be done on the ground and the implementation of it. Yes.
Ladies, it's been a long day. I'm going to let you go for now. Tomorrow we're back here, we're back on the grind and really kind of telling the story of South Africa. Thank you so much for today and thank you for the work that you do. When we return from the break, we're speaking to our data analyst, Michael O'Donovan, who's really going to unpack, some of the issues we've seen today and really looking perhaps at what the numbers may be telling us in the future. Do stay tuned.
I'm glad you're talking about the facility you were in, and obviously a lot of things happened that led you into that situation, and it's something that has been spoken much about, and it's something which you want to speak about because you want people to learn from those mistakes. Now, we'll come back to the football career, but just to sort of zoom into some things went wrong in your life as you went about. Where does the sort of problems start and how deep were they?
Firstly, I'm not at the stage in my life now where there's any room for excuses. Personally, the minute you run away from the morals and standards that your parents have drilled into you is the minute you're going to find interaction with Satan. So the minute you think that you are earning more money to sit at the table with your mother and your father, and you feel that power shift, taking his responsibilities onto your shoulders, without you at that point even being able to afford the petrol to take you to training. But you feel that because you're now starting to get a name, you are set for millions. All the luxury you're receiving, all the privileges you are receiving, and this is where I lost it. Is when I drifted away from the morals and principles that my parents installed in me.
Live from Gallagher Estate in Johannesburg in Midrand at the National IEC Results Center. You're with the SowetanLIVE. The show is Election 2024. Welcome back from the break. So, when I was listening to some of the conversations today, with my colleagues, but also just looking at some of the, videos coming through, two videos actually stood out for me. So the one is Mr. Julius Malema, the leader of the EFF, really talking about the fact that, he was being asked the question, do you even, does it even matter, what other opposition political parties may actually get in this election? And he says, No, not really. You know, he says what we're looking to do is to really take over, the country and essentially take over, the ANC's power. The second video that I thought was actually interesting was a video of the president of the country, and the president, of course, of the African National Congress, Cyril Ramaphosa, who was in Soweto today. And the president talking about the fact that, he believes in his heart of hearts that the ANC will actually retain its majority. Let's perhaps take a look at what the president had to say.
So it's wonderful to arrive here and to meet so many people who are coming to vote. They're voting for the stabilization and the extension of our democracy. And that is a great day for the people of South Africa. This is the day when South Africa decides on the future of our country, who should lead the government of South Africa. And I have no doubt whatsoever in my heart of hearts that the people will once again invest confidence in the African National Congress to continue to lead this country. I went into the voting station and greeted the various party agents and urged them to be relaxed and to smile, and then I proceeded to cast my vote. So it's a wonderful day, and I think it will go very well throughout the country. I spoke to the chair of the Independent Electoral Commission, and I told him that I'm now entering his precinct. At the door, at the gate, I said, I stopped being president, he's in charge and he's the boss. So I'm happy to be under his command and to be in the precinct that he controls for the day until he announces the results. So thank you very much for being here in your large numbers. It just goes to show the interest that the world also has in our democracy. I met a number of observers, and
so that is the IEC National Results Center, which is really going to be a hive of activity this week. This is really where it's all going to happen. This is where, the day of reckoning or the week of reckoning for South Africa will actually unfold. On those big screens, we'll be looking to see, who has actually had their message land with voters in South Africa. Today I'm joined by our analyst, Michael O'Donovan, who will be just kind of spending the week with us and going through some of the numbers and really unpacking what it is that they're saying. Michael, welcome.
Good evening.
So we were just playing a short clip now with the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, talking about how he believes in his heart of hearts that the ANC will retain its majority. Is he dreaming? Is he telling the truth?
Well, like most leaders of political parties, he's putting a positive spin on what is likely to happen. Hopefully, if you think it's a winner, you'll go vote for a winner. But the polls suggest otherwise, and the polls have been pretty consistent that the ANC is going to fall significantly short of 50%. So I'd be very surprised if they make 50%.
I mean, it's really been global news, right? Throughout the world, people have been asking themselves the question, will the ANC actually retain its majority? And of course, we've seen, as you say, some of the polls that have actually come out. Some of the polls, there is a great margin of error, I think. Some perhaps, better than others. But what do you think is really some of the elements that will take away from the ANC's majority should they actually lose that majority?
Well, a lot turns on the turnout rate. Now, we are probably heading for a fairly low turnout rate. I know the IEC is putting a positive spin on it. There are hints that they expect 66%, which is on par with what happened in the last national election. But all indications are it's going to be significantly lower than 66%. Now, that may actually be to the ANC's advantage. But it's also very unlikely that it's going to poll above 50%, even if the turnout rate falls that much.
So I mean, I'm looking now at the last general election in 2019, which is quite interesting. So, I mean, at the time, the ANC, 10 million people voted for the ANC. You know, the ANC walked away with a 57% of the vote. The DA came in at 20%, and the EFF, of course, at 10%. What do you think, perhaps, you know, the next two parties, so the DA and the EFF, may perform like in this election?
So, many of the polls are indicating that the next two parties are not the DA and the EFF, indicating that the DA with MK getting slightly more than the EFF. So the indications are at the moment that the DA will probably walk away with 24% of the vote, 11% going to MK, and 10% or so going to the EFF. So but that all assumes that a 45-46% vote for the ANC.
Yes. But I mean, let's unpack that, right? So when COPE all those years ago kind of came into the fray, what percentage did they get? Was it around 10 or so? Which was quite huge, for at the time. And I understand perhaps, the nitty-gritties about, lower turnout. But what is the basis of people saying, or some of the polls saying, the MK may get that much, sort of 11% or anywhere near 10%?
Well, I mean, and it's a very surprising finding because MK is so new and it's been in disarray. There's who leads the MK, who represents it. There's lack of clarity in this regard. But what resurfaces in the understanding of MK's rise is the resurfacing of a strong ethnic dimension to their voting patterns, with their stronghold being firmly amongst the Zulu population, and clear indications that perhaps MK will emerge as the biggest party in KwaZulu-Natal. So it's a combination of both ethnic identity plus the fairly populist message that MK is sending forward. So the ANC is really going to be in a position of deciding who the best partner to enter into a coalition with. Is it EFF? Is it MK? Or the DA?
The whole big conversation is about, coalition. If we actually go into, if there will be a coalition government, of course, in South Africa. And what do you think are some of the, if you're looking back, for example, at 2016, which is the first time that the coalition story really became our reality. What do you think perhaps are some of the conversations to look out for? What do you think will essentially drive, the backdoor, negotiating as far as the political parties are concerned?
So the first thing to look out for is how far short of 50% does the ANC get now, and then which parties can make up that difference easily. It's a very unhealthy situation where the leading coalition party has to enter into multiple agreements, because every one of those small parties they're negotiating with will want their pound of flesh. So they want to look to who can make up that 50% as easily as possible. And that probably points in an ideological affiliation to possibly the EFF or MK. The real problem comes in is if neither of those parties is big enough to give the ANC a majority in a coalition. And so we're entering into a new phase of South African national politics where the dominance by one political party is over. And even if Ramaphosa gets his 50%, he's going to be a tiny fraction above 50%. And he's going to have to start cooperating with other political parties to assure legislation is passed and so on.
So I was actually going to raise that point, right, to say, the other scenario, of course, and a very real scenario, is that the ANC doesn't lose power at all, right? And the ANC, stays above 50%, of course, as you say, at a very, minute number. What would that do to the ANC, just as far as, governance, collaboration with other political parties, and especially when it comes to kind of big ticket stuff that will happen in Parliament? What do you think that would be?
That's what I'm referring to as the new era that we're entering into. When you have a 66, 70% majority, you can do what you wish. Now you have into a period where you want to pass a law on some arbitrary issue. You now have to make sure that you don't lose because of absenteeism. You're not going to get that majority. You are now going to have to court like-minded other like-minded political parties, and this is good for democracy. This is good for inclusiveness, and it also allows those smaller parties, MK, EFF, to act as a check and balance on the processes. And hopefully we'll now enter an era where we have checks and balances on the leading party, that we have a dynamic democratic process. The problem really has been that the concentration on the election has been on the promises. Everybody's promising stuff. And we all know the promises are not going to be delivered. Nobody's going to create the jobs they suggest. But the democratic
2 million
machinery,
here, 5 million here.
but the democratic machinery will be reinvigorated.
Let's talk about the smaller, or rather the new political parties. I mean, aside from MK, but the new political parties coming through. So we're talking, your Rise in Mzansi, we're talking your Busa. There's been a lot of talk about how they, although we've seen them plastered across the country, kind of wall to wall, that perhaps they may not necessarily make much inroads. What do you think of that scenario?
I think it's very unlikely that any one of those parties makes an inroad on its own. But collectively, the 50 small parties may collectively make a major inroad into the political dynamic. So remember that you only need 0.25% of the vote, approximately 0.25% of the vote, to go into Parliament. Once you're in Parliament, you can now make an impact if you're on a portfolio committee, or, for example, the SCOPA. You can now reinvigorate those processes. When you have a 2/3 majority or a healthy majority, you don't need to listen to anybody else. You can just railroad. And so the small parties will enter. Some of these small parties are whack jobs.
Why is that?
People who believe they're ordained by God to lead the country, or stuff like that.
And they don't have to actually contest.
They don't actually have to contest. Or like the one independent says he's voting for MK. Yeah. He went to court to contest the election, but he says he's not voting for himself, he's voting for MK. So hopefully the parties that can be roped in on the decision-making process, on the standing committees on public accounts, on the portfolio committees, are those that can make a positive contribution to the body politic.
I mean, I was going to say, talking about that, I mean, I imagine, so if a smaller political party coming through, they win just one seat, right? And we all know, as you say, the real work of Parliament is in those committees, right? And that's where you kind of need to spread yourself out and actually have some impact. So if you've got like one seat, right, you're not necessarily going to make much of an impact as far, or are you, as far as the different committees are concerned?
But I'll give you an example. Okay, with one seat, you're not making any difference to the voting on a bill, unless it's extremely, extremely tight. But, for example, the leader of the Allied Movement for Change was on the Portfolio Committee in Parliament for Home Affairs, where he promoted the idea that visa-free travel for Palestinians was desirable. Now, it's not an issue that the big parties were concerned about, but as a small party, he is able to make a significant impact on something that is dear to them. And this process can be replicated across all the portfolio committees if we have more independent-minded small parties. And it's almost guaranteed that that's going to be the situation. If you are forming a coalition, you are going to get 50% plus a little bit, and you need the support of others.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about Palestine, and it's really been a big conversation, and rightfully so. It's really been a big conversation in South Africa. But I think the interesting thing is whether or not the Palestine conversation really, influences electoral decisions, right? I know you've got some interesting views just about who it may be detrimental to, or who it may not be detrimental to. So let's first talk about the ANC. Does the Palestine, question, does it support, for the people of Palestine, would it actually necessarily translate to electoral support or improved electoral support for the ANC?
If it does result in improved electoral support, it's going to be tiny for the ANC. There's little to indicate that the vast majority of South Africans are passionate about the issue. If you look at the size of protests, it's been dominated by the Muslim community, which make up less than 2% of the population. So it is very unlikely to ensure that a lot of voters flock to the ANC. But it has a profound impact on the Democratic Alliance. Now, the Democratic Alliance made a point of courting the votes of new constituencies of the last elections. And the one group that probably rallied more to their side than any other were middle-class Indian and colored voters. Now, a disproportionate number of them are Muslim. And they've been alienated by the DA's stand on Palestine. And now they are going to find another, or possibly revert back to the ANC as a political home, or find another home. Al-Jamaa, for example. So that's going to have a major impact of perhaps 4% on the Democratic Alliance.
That's a big number.
And it's particularly a big number when you are looking at possibly 23, 24% vote in your favor. And now you're losing 4% or 3%. The problem here is that, the problem for the DA is that the Muslims make up less than 2% of the voting age population. But being fairly well educated and fairly old demographic, they vote at very high rates. So they're going to punch above their weight in terms of influence. And they will be moving to different political homes.
Michael, I know I've made us, kind of jump the gun to what the possible outcomes will be, but I mean, there's still a couple of days to go through. So we're going to be here really looking, and one thing I think that you've said to me, off air is when there's something that seems exciting, just calm down. It may not necessarily be, yes, be the truth. So what can we look forward to? Just kind of, going to the next couple of days. I mean, of course, the counting is going to start. When do we perhaps begin to say this is when the picture is starting to shape up?
So voting closes at 9. We'll probably have the first results within an hour or so. And those are going to be from small voting stations that are not representative of any general trend. But as these numbers come in, and we're looking at possibly 10% of the votes counted by 2 o'clock in the morning,
yeah,
and then we can have fairly reliable predictions at national level of what to expect. So by tomorrow morning, people will have a very good idea of what's coming at national level. Provincial, it's going to take a bit longer.
And I think for many people that's really part of the interest, right? So of course there's national, and yes, many people are invested in that, but I think people are equally invested in the provincial results.
And that's where the more exciting things are going to happen, because it does translate into a big impact on national politics as well. Remember that your National Assembly of the 400 MPs is central to lawmaking, but then it has to go to the National Chamber of Provinces, which is in a position to veto any law. with either 50 or 66% majority. So, and the 9 provinces are equally represented in the NCOP. So big changes in the NCOP can make a big change in the way that the politics of South Africa is conducted.
Absolutely. Michael, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. We'll still be here for the rest of the week and kind of looking into the weekend. I know those numbers will be coming in, as you say, perhaps from tomorrow, thick and fast, and you'll be helping us unpack them. So we're here at the Galaga Estate, the IEC National Results Center. This is Elections 2024 with myself, Nwabisa Makunga. Please stay tuned from tomorrow about 11 o'clock, where we'll really be discussing some of the issues and some of the, hopefully, the early results that we will be seeing. And of course, again, tomorrow evening at the same time at 6 o'clock, where we'll really be looking at some of the how the results are actually shaping up. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned on Sowetan Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you.